Hello, boys and girls. I would like to introduce a new artist to you today. Our new artist is African American artist Benny Andrews. The title of the storybook that I will read to you today is called Draw What You See. The Life and Art of Artist Benny Andrews, as written by Kathleen Benson, illustrated with paintings by our famous artist Benny Andrews. Facts about the artist Benny Andrews. Benny Andrews' parents were sharecroppers, which meant that they lived on a farm and grew things such as corn and tomatoes and collard greens. Half of the crop they kept, the other half went to the owner of the farm. They grew a farm in Plainsville, Georgia. So yes, Benny Andrews grew up in Plainview, Georgia. His parents nurtured his artistic ability at age 7. They loved that he was able to draw and paint, and they wanted him to become very educated, so they encouraged him to go to school. During the time frame that he had schooling, school was only for 5 months. So he attended school for the complete 5 months, and the other 2 months he helped with the sharecropping and picking and growing plants and vegetables to be farmed. Despite being poor, his parents encouraged him to become educated, and he went on to graduate from college. Benny Andrews is a painter, I should say was, because he died in 2016. Benny Andrews was a painter and a collage artist. His paintings told stories about people and their everyday life. He used a style of artwork called figuratively. If you look at the people on the book, you'll see that the bodies look very tall and elongated. If you look on the wall, you will see a famous painting by the artist called Sunday Morning. And if you look at the preacher, you'll see his body seems to be as tall as a basketball player. The people body is elongated. Here we have a lady who's holding her head, standing up, listening to the words by the preacher, and her body seems to almost be as tall as the ceiling, and so does the preacher. One of the reasons that Benny Andrews elongated, the word elongated means to scratch or make tall. He elongated the bodies to provide more perspective. Again, when we're talking about perspective, we're talking about depth, meaning that you can really concentrate on the people. He's given a sense of focus or attention to the body so that you can just stare at the picture and just be drawn to the picture or painting and be mesmerized by it. He forced people to look at what was happening in the painting. As I stated, when you look at this painting, you see people praying, people who are shouting and giving praise because they're listening to the words of the preacher or the minister. With an elongated body, you're also creating movement. These people, when you look at their hands almost, in a sense, have a sense of flow or movement. Now, we're going to talk about our artist, Benny Andrews. As I just stated, he created collages as well as a painter. This particular book shows a collection of the paintings that he did for his storybook called Draw What You See. I hope you will enjoy the storybook. Let's get ready. New Orleans, Louisiana, 2005. When Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, whole families lost their homes. People had to live in camps set up by the government or move miles away to stay with relatives or friends. Children had to go to makeshift schools. The artist Benny Andrews traveled from New York City to Louisiana to work with those students. He showed them how to draw pictures of what they had seen, to use art to express their feelings about what they had been through. He knew from his own experience how important this kind of self-expression was, and he knew that sometimes it was easier to tell a story with pictures than with words. As we can see again in the painting behind me, Benny Andrews is telling a story about Sunday morning at church. Plainview, Georgia, 1933. Benny started to draw when he was 3 years old. Once he started, he never stopped. At first, he made pictures of worlds around him. He drew hot suns, red clay, and little wood frame houses in the middle of the cotton fields that stretched out as far as he could see. He drew black people at work in the fields. Just about everyone Benny New worked in the cotton fields on farms owned by white people. Every morning except Sunday, they reported to white bosses. Benny, Mama, and Daddy had other jobs too. They had 10 children to feed. Pay attention to the body. Look at how the body seems to be elongated. It's stretched out where you pay nothing but very close attention to the person, and it provides you with a perspective, and your interest is only on that particular person. On Sunday, the family went to church. Benny loved the colorful hats the women wore. He sang hymns at the top of his voice, swaying with the congregation. When the preacher shouted about suffering and justice, Benny made pictures in his mind. His home, he drew the church ladies' hats and the preacher Bible stories. In grade school, Benny was always the class artist. He copied the comments in the daily newspaper. He drew the stories he heard on the radio and the stars in the movies he went to see in towns on Saturday. After school, Benny worked carrying water to the laborers in the fields. At planting and harvest time, he didn't go to school at all. None of the black children in Plainville did because they were needed on the farms. Their school year was only about 5 months long. Can you imagine that? By the time they were teenagers, most of Benny's friends went to work in the fields full time. But Benny was miserable there. Every row of crops was the same as every other row. The hot sun beat down through the straw hat on his head. The hoe was heavy in his hand. We know that a hoe is a garden tool that you use to dig up soil in the ground. Benny dreamed of leaving. He did not have a clear plan, but he knew the first step was to attend high school. He was glad when his mother made arrangement with their farm boss, Mr. Will, so he could go to school. When Benny's military service was over, the government offered to pay his college tuition. He moved to Chicago to attend art school. It was the biggest city he had ever seen, full of many different kinds of people, towering buildings, and best of all, museums. Benny could spend an entire day looking at art if he wanted. He never felt so free. Home was always in his heart, but Plainview, Georgia, and the white bosses and the black farm workers and the rows of crops, all the same, were far behind him now. Benny was inspired by the people around him, and people were what he wanted to draw. He especially liked making paintings of the jazz musicians in the city's many clubs and cafes. He loved meeting them and listening to their music, and he learned how to show the rhythms of their songs in his artwork. With lots of practice, he became a master at capturing movement on the still canvas. Benny also made pictures of the ordinary people he saw, like the janitor who worked at his school. He liked to think of himself as a people's painter, and he discovered that sticking pieces of paper and canvas on his pictures made them seem more textured and more real. After art school, Benny moved to New York City and became a working artist. He had so many stories to tell. He began to create a series of paintings about his childhood in Georgia. Making several pictures based on the same thing was a whole new way for him to tell stories with his artwork. He painted the people on the streets of Harlem, the happiness and sadness that he saw, and the demonstrations that marked the beginning of the civil rights movement. Benny fought for equal rights for African Americans, especially artists. He protested against museums and galleries that did not exhibit the work of women and people of color. He formed a group to help organize exhibitions of artwork by those who were often excluded by the art world. Benny also began to teach first at the community center and then at a college. He took his students to a prison to teach art to the inmates. He believed that art was for everyone. Benny Andrews worked hard his entire life, and all that work paid off. He became a respected artist. His paintings were shown at big museums, art galleries, community centers, and colleges. He made pictures for children's books. Benny's success made him even more determined to help others and to share his love of art with them. He continued to teach people from many different backgrounds to use art to tell their stories, and to start he did by drawing exactly what he saw. So Benny Andrews loved to tell stories. This is a picture of the artist. This is a picture of our artist, Benny Andrews. Here's what I need you to do for your assignment. I need you to tell a story. I need you to draw a picture of yourself elongated. And we know elongated meaning that you're stretching your body out where it appears to be tall, so that when you look at your painting or drawing, you basically can only see your body and your figure. So when you draw your picture, make sure that it's very, very tall and long, and create an elongated body, and create a story. Tell me, what are you doing at home during these vital times that we're just pretty much in with our family? You might be in spending time with your parents, learning how to read, or reading to your parents' storybooks. You might even spend time playing some card games or watching television. Tell a story in your artwork, but make sure that you elongate your body. This has been Miss Johnson reading the storybook called Draw What You See, The Life and Art of Famous African American Artist Benny Andrews. Please tell your story. Again, this has been Miss Johnson. I enjoy you. Hope to see you real soon.